Wow, look at all these bolts. So I drilled out these louvers so that I can get the proper screws in there. What they want you to do is use the cable ties to attach the vent tube to the air distribution unit and then also to each of these louvers. I'll say right up front, I had to disconnect the air distribution unit in order to get those vent tubes in there. It was just absolutely impossible working under there. So again, it was a matter of taking the 4 screws out and letting it drop down. Basically what you do, you kind of have to squeeze this so that it'll fit over, and then push it over like so, and you get it in place. And once you do that, you take a cable tie and you cinch it down with that tie so that it doesn't move. Okay, so this is what they look like once they're in place. You get a cable tie on there like so to make sure that it's on tight, and then you put it in to the car like so. I have yet to do the drill holes. On the side here, I got to be careful that I don't go in too far because I got the brake release and I also have my vent. So, you know, it's not as though I want to do it like that. I want to have it under these 2 switches and make sure that at the same time I'm not drilling into any of the components that the switches are made of. So this is what it looks like when they're all installed. I have all 4 in, and the last thing they said to do was to take the glove compartment and put that back in. That glove compartment is pretty small in comparison to the old one. I think I'm going to be able to get the owner's manual in there, and that'll be about it. It is tiny. But you gotta remember, you've got all of that stuff back up underneath the dash that was never there before. So that pretty much wraps it up for the inside of the car. We're going to move on to the front and finish up some things under the engine compartment next. So I got my shipment of new fender bolts in from Parts Geek. These are what we're going to use to put the inner fender back on. These clips that you see here, they go underneath the metal of the fender. They kind of sandwich in between the layers where the hole is, and then this guy pops through and you screw them right in. And that's what holds the inner fender on. Now that we have those bolts in, we can start putting back together that inner fender. I only have it in with a few bolts that I didn't have to zing off with the angle grinder. And now that I have brand new ones, we're going to put that all back together again. Okay, so I've got the inner fender back in, got the trim ring back on, wheels back on. We're going to bring this thing back down now and move on to the rest of the work that's in the engine compartment. I usually set these at about 80 foot-pounds of torque. That ought to do it. So the next thing that we're working on is the discharge hose. That is attached starting at this end. The straight end goes into this connection down here that we had to put through the fender wall, and that takes a 7/8 inch wrench. Then the other half goes over to the compressor, and I'll show you that. That we're doing right here. I'm going to take this cap off, and then we'll put a little bit of mineral oil on the O-ring. So we'll move that up. This is also a 7/8 inch. So this next hose that's going in, this is the discharge hose that's coming in over here. We have to get our mineral oil on both of these O-rings, so we'll do that right now. And get a goodly amount there. Make sure we get that covered. And then the other one is over here. Get that covered too. So this next hose here is called a suction hose. You can tell that it's got this on it, and that goes up top here. I've already taken that little cap off, and I'm now just going to finger tight that in for the time being. I don't want to tighten it down completely yet because I want to be able to fit this in as well. This goes right here up against the firewall. So this last hose is hooked in to this connector here. Remember, we ran this over the headlight and out this way. I still have to tighten this up, but it connects here, and then it terminates over on the firewall. It's that last connection right there. And what I've done is I've run the hose behind the inner fender well, between the outer and inner fenders, so that it's kind of out of the way. The reason I'm doing that is because, first off, it seemed to fit much better that way, and secondly, I also have to put heater hoses in, and they're going to route kind of this way. They'll be going to the intake manifold as well as the water pump, so those two have to be done as well. So there's one last little bit of wiring that has to be done, and that's coming from the dryer here. You see these two white wires. I don't know why, for some reason, they're so short on mine. I've seen videos showing the installation of this portion, and the wires are much, much longer. Looks to me like I'm going to have to splice some in. Those two wires go to, one goes to this black wire. It took me a couple of minutes to find this because it was wrapped around the compressor. So I did see it poking its little head out there, and I was able to unwind it. So one goes there, and then you remember the infamous blue wire, which is down here, that we poked through the firewall. The other wire goes there. They don't say that one specific one goes to a specific one over here, so I'm assuming that they're both pretty much the same, and then they're going to be sending signals to both of these units. So those are the last two connections that I have to make, and once I've done those, then the very last thing will be starting to work on getting the heater hoses hooked up. So I put my splice together right here, and I put some shrink wrap on it and then cable tied it to this tubing so that the thing won't move. Then I routed the wire around the top of the headlight, and cable tied the other end to the other end of that tube. So now this wire is sticking out over here, and it'll pretty much stay out of harm's way. So now we just have to hook it up to the other two pieces. I'll have to attach a spade terminal to one side so they can go down to the blue wire, and then a crimp terminal to the other. This next little job involves attaching this temperature control onto the back area where the heater core is. Basically, this temperature control opens and shuts and will allow water to flow through the heater control or stop it. So the idea, you can see that, open and closed. So the idea is to get this in place and then hook up the control cable that we popped through the firewall some time ago, and make sure that that's opening and closing properly. We're going to do that next. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with how this plumbing works, your heater hoses are set up so that the hose comes out of the intake manifold and into the bottom where it allows the core to fill up, and then it exits out this top and goes into the water pump, and that's where you get your circulation. So this has to be installed on the very top portion, which is what I'm going to be doing next. So in the original instructions it says that you should be installing this at the firewall, but I did not do that because I was having a lot of trouble with the length of the cable. So I installed it here on the other end at the water pump side, and as you can see, it's working just fine. So that's opening and closing that valve the way it's supposed to, and that'll allow the water to flow through or restrict it based on whether I want the temperature hot or cold. This last heater hose is going to be coming in here. What I had to do here was drill out the plug, and I'm just about to put a tap in there and get it threaded. And once that's done, I'll be able to put the connector in and then hook up that last heater hose. I'm using a magnet here to get any little pieces of steel that may have gotten into the engine. You can see, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm picking up just a few pieces. I'm using a borescope here just to make sure that I've gotten rid of all the particulate matter and there's nothing left inside the intake manifold before I proceed to the next step. I'm ready to get this put back together now. So I'm just coating the threads here with some Permatex. I'm going to coat these inner threads and then also the threads on the nipple itself so that I get a good coating all the way around. Okay, so you can see now that we've got everything back together. Car's running. I've checked it for leaks, and all of the radiator hoses and heater hoses are working fine. So now at this point I have heat in the car. We still don't have AC because I have not gotten the refrigerant put in. I'm not an HV technician and I'm not comfortable with doing that. So I'm going to be taking it to a local shop. They'll take care of it for me. If they allow me to do it, I might even film that. But for now, I'm calling this a success. We go inside the car. And you can see blowers are working. I actually have heat coming out right now. It's pretty awesome. So overall, this has been pretty successful. I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out, and we'll move on to some final thoughts. Okay, final thoughts. First off, if I had to do this again, would I do it? Absolutely. Air conditioning that's a must-have down here in Texas, and in the summertime it gets into triple digits. You gotta have air conditioning. So I'm really thrilled with the fact that I've got that. And then the extra bonus is that now I have heat too. When I bought this car, all of that stuff had been disconnected, and so there was no heat, nothing. So now I've got both, and I'm really excited to get this over to have it charged up. Was it harder to do than I expected? Yeah, there were pieces of it that were a lot harder than I expected. Most particularly, taking that inner fender off was really difficult. I had to take about half of those bolts off with an angle cutter because they were just rusted in there. Once I got them off, I was able to get that blower motor housing out of there, and everything was fine. The other thing that was kind of tough was getting the actual new blower unit and air distribution unit into the car. I had to have help with that because you need someone to help you navigate getting that thing in a position and getting the one bolt through the firewall so that somebody can quick put a nut on there and hold it in place. After that, things were pretty straightforward. I just took my time on this thing because I just didn't want to screw anything up, and I wanted to make sure I got everything right. Classic Auto Air, customer support. All I can say is their support is stellar. I worked with a fellow whose name is Dwight, and he was able to talk me through any issues or questions that I had about this whole installation process. You remember at one point I found that wire that was broken off the micro switch on the air distribution unit. They were very fast on sending out a second switch for me that I was able to put in, and there was no charge. It was considered under warranty. So I can't say enough good stuff about their customer service overall. The overall quality of Classic Auto Air, I would say, is pretty good. The only thing that you have to be careful about are some of those connections that are under the dash where you have to kind of maneuver around those. I think I may have been the guy that broke that micro switch connection. I wouldn't be surprised at all because they are very fiddly and you got to be real careful with them. So that's something to keep in mind. Overall thoughts about it, I'm really happy with the way things turned out, and I just can't wait to get her back on the road. I've already tested everything. I don't have any leaks. Everything looks good. Everything's working the way I expect it to. So now it's just a question of getting it down to a place to have the HVAC charged up. There's a local spot here called Checkered Flag Automotive. They do air conditioning charging. I've got a buddy who's done probably 3 or 4 of these, and he always takes it to them. They always do a super job, so that's my next stop with it. Other than that, I'd I'd say we're done, and we'll be going on to the next project, whatever that's going to be. I'll see you later.